Happy Halloween, ladies and gentlemen. As you guys can tell, I did decide to dress up this year. I dressed up as someone who's appreciating the benefits of ultra-wideband 5G. And as you can see, nothing has changed. But I don't care about 5G today. I'm more excited to talk about the special things Apple has in store for the last part of 2020, which Tim Cook was dropping a few hints on at the last earnings call, and that mostly involves the Mac and its first steps into the Apple Silicon world. Let's begin. So we're getting some leaks, some rumors are brewing from the China Times, who has a somewhat decent track record, not great, not terrible, somewhere in the middle, and they're talking about how Apple is developing their own GPU for the next generation iMac, alongside this desktop class processor that they claim is going to be called the A14T chip, and Apple is also working on reviving the 12-inch MacBook form factor with the A14X chip. So there's a lot to unpack there, and there's a lot of conflicting reports now that we're getting from, in my opinion, a much more reliable leaker, Ming-Chi Kuo, who was saying the first Mac to get Apple Silicon would be a 13-inch MacBook Pro. China Times is butting heads with Kuo a little bit here and saying no, they plan on reintroducing that 12-inch form factor that was discontinued a while back, and instead bringing it basically what the next generation iPad Pro is supposed to get. But keep in mind, iPad Pro is also not rumored to come out in the next few months, so it sounds like A14X chip might find its way into the MacBook before it actually finds its way into the iPad Pros. Some of you might be a bit upset by that, and I would somewhat understand, though. Hearing that Apple, of course, wants to have their own dedicated series of chips for the desktop architecture is very exciting, because it's easy to forget, Apple's never really done this before. I mean, they've been designing Apple Silicon for the Apple Watch and for the iPads, and sometimes they'll throw in an Apple Silicon chip from an iPad into the Apple TV, but for the most part, they have not made, a powerhouse desktop with their own custom silicon processor, and I don't mean like a security chip. No, I'm not talking about the T1 or the T2 chip. I'm talking about, fully fledged, all-out processor that will be handling, of course, all of your video rendering, your audio engineering, your software coding, all of that, except it's going to be beefed up, of course, because you no longer have a battery to worry about. And knowing how efficient and powerful Apple Silicon can be on devices that do have batteries, and they have to somewhat limit their power consumption, it'll be fascinating now to see how Apple can design a processor when they don't really have to worry that much about energy efficiency. They just have to make sure it doesn't overheat, which, given right now they're shipping some of their iMacs with Intel i9 processors, beating those in thermal management shouldn't be very hard. So I think this would be really impressive. And if you've been following Apple's developer support videos online, you know that they did kind of subtly confirm they are working on their own dedicated graphics cards, but hearing that those are finally going to make their official debut in the all-in-one iMac redesign just gets me all the more excited, because if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I think the iMacs are long overdue for an upgrade, and I cannot wait to see what's in store for this next generation one. There's been lots of leaks confirming that there's a 24-inch redesigned iMac in the works. I'm hoping that's just the entry-level one, and they also have a giant, 32-inch one in the works as well, but most likely we wouldn't see that 32-inch one by the end of the year. And this new A14X and A14T processors are being built on the 5nm footprint, so same size processor that you're putting in the iPhone 12 mini is going to be the same size processor that you put in a 24-inch iMac, which is crazy to think about, but obviously those MacBooks and iMacs have much less battery constraints to worry about than that 12 mini, and of course you should expect much faster processing speeds out of these things. And my hope is that with them implementing, Apple designed hardware inside and out, they could also incorporate things like Face ID into the iMac, or maybe even the MacBook, but that has such a thinner display panel, I could see why they have a hard time adopting it there. Though it's important to remember here, Apple is not switching to their own silicon to be barely as good as what they're currently using in their iMac, so anything Apple is rolling out right now is going to surpass and perform better than anything they're currently using in their iMacs right now. So knowing that they're ramping production of the A14X chip as well as this A14T chip, which I guess iMacs have had those T series security chips for a while, so maybe incorporating T into the name kind of solidifies everything. Though I will admit it's a bit confusing when Tim Cook said at Quadruple UDC that this Apple Silicon transition would incorporate a new family of processors, because I thought that meant no longer using the same branding as the iPhones and iPads. So seeing A14X chip or A14T chip, I really didn't think they would call it that. I thought they might give it some new name or some new branding, but honestly, it's just a name of a processor, guys. It says nothing about how good the processor actually is. I mean, just think about how much better the A12Z chip is than the regular A12 chip. So that final letter in the name can make all the difference in real-world performance, and that's just the difference between an iPhone and an iPad. If we're talking about the difference between an iPhone and a giant Mac, then I think we should expect some pretty big performance gains there. But personally, I would love to see a revival of the 12-inch MacBook. I know that not everyone loved those things, but I reviewed it a few years back and I thought it was fun. You know, the performance on it obviously was not great, and you had to put up with pretty crappy specs, although it was very, very light. There was no fan in it, and I could actually type on it with just my thumbs because that's how portable and compact that laptop was. And I know that's probably Apple's dream vision of what they want laptops to be like, but they just decided they couldn't make that work because the specs were too bad, and they kind of moved all of what they learned in that 12-inch MacBook to the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, which are of course bigger and a bit more heavier, but they do have fans in them so they can handle higher performance tasks a bit better. So I do agree that if Apple wants to introduce Apple Silicon, if they want to know where to start, starting off with the thinnest, lightest, most portable laptop possible is probably a good way to do it, because then you'll be able to get, you know, better than iPad Pro class GPU and CPU performance, but still have great battery life and have it in a very thin and compact design. And I hope the China Times is right here. I want to see that 12-inch MacBook come back, especially if the bezels could be somewhat thinner. That would also be appreciated. But at the same time, Kuo has gotten a lot of things right in the past, and he's still saying 13-inch MacBook Pro is the first one we would see, which I guess I'm less excited for, because that would likely mean we have the same design that we currently have, and we would still have Intel-powered 13-inch MacBook Pros, and now we would just have these entry-level Apple Silicon 13-inch MacBook Pro. It just would be harder to get excited for because it's kind of confusing. Instead of just introducing, or maybe I should say reviving, you know, the brand new 12-inch MacBook now powered by Apple Silicon, which can now outperform some of those base model MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros, but it's super thin, it's super light. The only compromise being, of course, that since it's no longer running Intel, you may run into certain issues with app emulation, or you probably won't be able to do boot camp and that kind of thing as well. But macOS Big Sur does look like it's trying to bridge this gap between the x86 architecture to the ARM architecture fairly seamlessly, so you should be able to still run older programs and it can convert them on the spot. But yes, hopefully we get some of this stuff actually confirmed next month at another Apple event. So many Apple events this year, and so many of them are uneventful, but still, if Apple was willing to have an event for the Apple Watch and some new iPad colors, then I think they're going to be willing to have an event for the transition to Apple Silicon. So most likely going to be the third Tuesday of next month, which would be the 17th, and we can get more confirmation on the rollout of Apple Silicon there. I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited too, and I appreciate you guys for watching, and I hope you have a very safe Halloween. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.